Well, thank you, Colin Woolway, for doing this. Really appreciate you being here with us. Thank you.
I appreciate being anywhere.
Well, yeah, we can't go anywhere else, so we may as well be maybe talking about drums if we can't be actually doing it. So, no, it's fantastic. I'm doing a series of these. They're called Percussion Discussion, which has probably been used somewhere else before, but it's just a little series of just chats about drums. So there's a lot to talk about with you. So the first thing I'm going to ask, I've written some questions down. When did it all start for you? When did you learn? Who did you have a teacher first? So any information?
I'll try and compress this because everything's a long story. I got sibling rivalry when I was about 11 years old, as my brother was learning to play the guitar and I didn't have anything to do. And I found out there were drum lessons at the school that I went to. So I immediately signed up for them to discover they were percussion lessons. There was a snare drum, timpani and xylophone. And an old boy who was an ex-army trumpeter or something, and he was in his 80s then. But I figured that was the nearest I was going to get to a drum, so I signed up for these lessons. And looking back on that, I must have been hideously influenced by that old boy because he was not a drummer. He could not play the drums, but he was a very good teacher.
Yeah.
And he would hold the drumsticks properly, and he'd stand at the snare drum and say, "Right, boys, let's do a buzz, let's do a roll, you know, let's do a press roll." He couldn't do one, but he'd just bluff it. He'd go, and he would have us do it, you know, and he taught me to read music, and we would play the timpani, and I actually played tubular bells at a concert, tubular bells,
yes,
at a concert, going back a very, very long time. But by that time, my parents had actually bought me a drum kit for 30 quid.
Yeah.
So I was off then. As soon as somebody showed me what the bass drum was for, because I didn't know what to do with the bass drum, I was away.
Yeah.
But about 11 years old, I got my first drum kit at 11 years old.
Is that where you think your love of rudiments came from then, from that first teacher perhaps?
Certainly interested, yeah, because you know, this old boy was saying this is a drag, this is a flam, and it's all very military based. So he's going.
Is that not the best grounding you could have had though? You know, at that age.
Well, it was good in a way because he was serious.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you know, if you get your first drum kit and you learn your first drum beat and no one shows you what to do, who knows where you're going to go? You might end up making all kinds of mistakes. But this teacher, his name was George Clark, and obviously I'll never forget him. At least he was serious. You know, come on, boys, let's play this properly. And he'd teach us to read the music, and he'd say this when you play that's a drag. I mean, he knew some things about drum. The single stroke, the mummy daddy roll.
Yeah, yeah.
He called it the mummy daddy.
Many do, or still do even. Yeah.
I haven't had anyone say that in so long now. But that was it when in the 60s and 70s, it was the mummy daddy roll. Absolutely. And he would have us do it. You never sit there going, I seem to remember these 10 minutes of buzz roll.
But like, you know, I think it's a great grounding. My background is brass bands. So.
But of course, because he was from the army, he was straight backed and come on, boys. And he was serious about it. So yeah, I enjoyed it. And yes, I think that was a good start.
Yeah, I think
you need to take things seriously.
Yeah, know? Absolutely. I mean, I find that, you know, to learn that way around, to learn those things first, a lot of students I have these days can do the rock stuff, they can do the pop stuff, but they can't, if they've not had lessons, they don't know the rudimental side, even the basic stuff. They can play a single roll, but a single stroke roll, but they don't actually know what it is, even though they can play one.
This is interesting because if I then go through my teenage years and I left school at 16 because there was so much work around, you know, my parents obviously were not happy with that, but I was saying, you know, I'm already working every Saturday night. Why don't I just take this seriously and try and get some proper jobs? So, but what I'm saying is that in my teenage years, I was very, how can I say this? I knew what the rudiments were. I didn't really appreciate how to use them, but at least I knew what they were. So I knew what a paradiddle was. Of course, Billy Cobham had come along. So everybody wanted to play paradiddles, and I knew what that was, and I was watching Billy Cobham and thinking, okay, that's how he does it. Well, I think that's how he does it. And by then, of course, I bumped into some jazz drummers who were saying, this is how we use rudiments. I bumped into Brian Spring.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've come across Brian Spring.
I haven't, no.
So Brian Spring, I think he's still alive. He was a very well-respected jazz drummer. And he was one of those drummers who everybody knew him, said he was the best in the country. But a lot of people didn't know him.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't mean a lot, that, does it? You can have...
Yeah. And he scribbled something down on a piece of paper for me. And I looked at it and thought, bloody hell, those are rudiments. But he makes them sound like jazz.
Yeah.
So I was very much getting into that. And so to go back to your original question, because there is something that I want to talk about later about rudiments. In those days, between about the 70s, one thing would lead to another by word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So you'd get a gig and you play with a band and you do some gigs with a band, and we were getting paid money with dance band gigs and things. And sooner or later, somebody says, we know a drummer, we know a band that needs a drummer, and blah, 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 and that we know a guy putting on a summer season. I know he hasn't got a drummer. So now I'm doing a summer season, and now I'm doing a pantomime. And now I'm doing some work at the Palace Theatre in Westcliff-on-Sea, in the pit. And the MD says, I'm doing another show in Ipswich, can you come and do that? And I was only 17, 18 years old, but getting a lot of work, because that's how it was, there was so much work around. Pub gigs, Yeah.
Those days are long gone, aren't they? When you just one job into another.
5 or 6 nights a week.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the era of even the club band. That was just starting to die out in the 70s, the whole club scene. Yeah. But I knew musicians who were professional club musicians. That's what they did. Yeah. They didn't do anything during the day, and they'd drive out to the club, play at the club, and come home, and they'd do that 6 nights a week.
Yeah, it's a shame.
That scene was dying out when the London clubs and all those stories of guys doing 3 gigs a night.
I can imagine.
Because that's what they do a West End show, for example, then they go on to do a club, and then they go on to do the other club, and that would be the one that would stop at 3 a.m. and
sleep.
Bass players wandering around Soho with their bass on their back and an amp, going to the next gig. I came into the business just as all that was dying out.
Yeah. Do you remember your first gig?
What, paid gig?
Yeah.
Well, first time I played the drums.
First professional gig, if you like. It
was Joseph the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Oh, right, okay.
At the Civic Theatre in Chelmsford in Essex.
So I went to full-on reading gig for your first one, then?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, it was a reading gig, but no, my reading wasn't very, very good. My brother plays guitar, right, and he got the gig. Mm-hmm. And he came home. I was like 14 years old. He would have been 16.
Brilliant, great experience.
And he came home saying, "Oh, guess what? And I was like, "Ooh." And then 2 days later, he came home and said, "Right, they need a drummer." So I've told them you'll do it. And I went out and bought the record.
Yeah.
I learned the songs from the record. And when they gave me the score. I could read a bit of music. Yes. I couldn't sight read. Yes. But when I looked at the score, I thought, well, okay, I know this song. So if that's what it is, I'll just play that. But I know the song anyway.
Just pray the arrangement's the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were pretty much. If I made a mistake, I remember the MD stopping and saying, "No, that wasn't quite right." And me going, "Oh, really? Let's do it again." I'd get it right second time round.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So that was my first paid one, 35 quid a week for 2 weeks, 70 quid.
That's pretty decent money. When we're talking.
I was old in 1973 or 4.
That's good money.
Yeah, it was good.
So we're going to move on a little bit, and probably the person you're most famous for having played for, Suzi Quatro.
Yes.
How did you, first of all, how did you land up with that gig?
So again, long story short, on 2 occasions in my career, I've stopped and reassessed, and this was one of them. I was living in Chelmsford, in Essex. I had been doing theatre work, and I wanted to not do any more theatre work because I could see if I'm not careful, I'm going to end up just doing theatres all the time.
Yeah.
Because the money was good. You know, it's very tempting to just go from one show to the next show. And I thought, well, I might end up in the West End. And then I was thinking, but what if I end up in the West End playing a show I really hate? I'm going to have to do it every night, you know, and I'm thinking, no, I don't want to do that. So I got a job in a music shop. Now, here, I'm going to cut the story really short. I got a job in a music shop selling drums at a time when Suzi had been on the road for 12 years. She'd done all her hits and she'd been touring for 12 years and she wanted to have kids. So she'd taken time off and she lived just outside Chelmsford. And her old man, Len Tuckey, who was the guitar player and her manager, he used to come into the shop to check out the guitars because there were a lot of vintage guitars there and hang out. He'd sometimes just come and lean on the counter and have a cup of coffee. And so obviously I got to know him, and sooner or later he says, look, I'm doing some sessions. Do you want to, you know, how much do you want to play the drums? So I ended up doing quite a few sessions for him. Yeah. And when Suzi, and Suzi would drop in, and there was a local pub on a Tuesday night, they'd have a rock and roll night. Very, very good band, actually, very good band. And Suzi would sometimes sit in. And she was pregnant, and the bass was like at this angle because she was leaning up on her tummy. And sometimes I would sit in, and sometimes I would sit in at the same time Suzi was sitting in, and I would occasionally catch something that she wanted to do on the bass, and she'd turn around and smile. And the day came when she wanted to go back on the road, and her old drummer, the very, very good Dave Neal, who played on all the hits, he said he didn't want to do it. So they said, well, who's next in line? Who's the little guy? You know, Len said, oh, he's very good. Well, I assume Len said he's very good. I mean, what Len and Suzi had not really experienced was a drummer like you and me who can do anything you ask them to do. Well, I don't know about me. No, I'm sure. You know, so if Len said, can you give this a reggae feel, or can you put a fill in here, or can you, I would say okay. And so Suzi was quite surprised, you know, when I had to learn the way Dave had played the songs. And I'll tell anyone listening to this interview who thinks playing Devilgate Drive is a piece of piss, it's not as easy as it looks, actually. No, sure. And Suzi was a very demanding band leader. Yeah. She knew exactly what she wanted. And that would be the sort of situation, it's very difficult to explain, where, yeah, you're playing the right notes, but there's just something that's not right. And you're playing the right notes, but I really dig the way you're playing them. Yes. So fortunately for me, Suzi was happy with the way I was delivering her songs. But also, if I put in something else, she would say, I've never had a drummer do that before. And she'd say, don't do that again. Or she'd play it, and it would stay in. Yeah, yeah. So the answer to your question, it was just right place, right time. Yeah, yeah. You must have had some fun on that gig. Those, you know. Yeah, you must have had some fun on that gig, Colin. Oh yeah, yeah. So literally, you've been everywhere with Suzi, then all around the world. All over the place, yeah, yeah. And it was a great show to do. And I think the thing that made me most happy was that she was a genuine rock and roller. It wasn't an act. No. That's actually her. Yeah, it's not at all. It wasn't like joining one of those. I mean, we toured with a lot of the 70s pop bands who, quite frankly, I don't know how they kept going, because it was an act. Yeah. But it was never an act for Suzi. She meant every bloody word, you know. Yeah. And the first show I did with her was in Australia. So you can imagine a bit of jet lag was involved. And I distinctly remember getting on the stage thinking, okay, well, I don't know I've never been in this situation before. I'm jet lagged. I'm in front of, I don't know, 10,000 people. And I remember looking at Suzi, who's always been older than me, thinking, well, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
And she's throwing herself about from one side of the stage to the other with reckless abandon. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for her, then it's good enough for me. I've got no excuse. You know, if she can do it, I can do it. You know, at least I'm sitting down. You know?
And not dressed top to toe in leather.
Oh, it was.
Oh, well, yeah, all right, okay, fair enough then.
Oh, trousers, anyway.
Yeah.
Which is another story. Because they were her trousers.
Oh, really? Seriously?
I won't go there.
Yeah. The title of a book there, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, you can make up the rest. No, don't go.
No, I wouldn't dream of it. So that was it 10 years or something you were with Suzi?
It was 8 years.
8 years, yeah.
It was a lot of work. I mean, I don't mind telling you, I got my first mortgage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was no. I was a paid session player. I wasn't in the band.
No.
But there was a lot of it.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's you know.
And it taught you a lot about touring.
Yeah.
There is such a thing in a musician. There is such a thing as a good tourer and a bad tourer. Someone who does well on tour. You know, if you've got an above average musician who delivers every night and they're good on tour, you'd rather have that than a fantastic, brilliant musician who takes his socks off every night but is a rubbish tourer. You know, moody, drunk, hungover, late.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen musicians get sacked, and I've seen musicians held on to because you can rely on them.
That's half the battle, isn't it? Surely it's got to be.
Yeah, the lobby call.
Yeah.
You know, never be late for the lobby call.
No.
Never be late 3 times. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's your P45.
Yeah.
So then, after Suzi, did you? I know you don't tour. You don't. I don't think you do any gigs anymore that I know of. No. Did you stop after Suzi, or did you?
Yeah. Well, I wound down after Suzi.
Yeah.
Because there was some writing on the wall there. You know, I just didn't want to be a touring musician. I mean, I'm 61 now.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be doing it.
Yeah. No,
I thought, you know, Suzi had ticked a lot of boxes for me in terms of what I had set out to achieve in 1976 when I left school. Mm-hmm. And I started to think, well, you know, I've done an awful lot. But, you know, if I'm going to get married and have a family, that isn't going to work. Yeah. And I really, really like teaching. Yeah. And I had this idea for the Drumsense book.
Of course.
And I started to think, well, if I'm ever going to do this, I'm not going to do it on tour.
No.
So I think what I'm going to do is, if I leave Suzi's band, then I won't go back in that direction. I'm going to look in this direction and head towards the education thing. I'd met Lucy by then, and we got married. And I just started to think there's more to life than touring. You know, family is incredibly important to me. It's definitely first on my list. Yeah. And family and teaching go really well together. Fortunately for me, I love teaching. Yeah, well, that's perfect then, isn't it? If that's the case. Yeah, and gigs just got harder and harder and harder to do. And I've said for a long time now that the reason that I don't do gigs anymore is very personal. Mm-hmm. And I don't say to young drummers, well, listen to me, you don't want to be doing gigs. You know, no. I'm not bitter and twisted. You know, I always say to the young drummers, just go out and do whatever you can find. Yeah. Whatever you can find. Yeah. But for me, as the 90s went on, I started to see the writing on the wall. It was getting harder and harder to get work, and you weren't any more appreciated. You certainly weren't better paid. Now, the caveat there is actually some gigs had, you know, like the dance band gigs, the function gigs. Yeah. The money was pretty good for those, and there were guys earning a lot of money. So when I started in the business, you know, a function gig was a tenner each. Yeah. You could book a band for 50 quid. Yeah. And in the 90s, you're saying bands are costing 750, £1,000 because everyone in the band wants 200 quid.
Of course, yeah.
And but you know, I wasn't some kind of visionary mystic, I could just see that wasn't going to get any better, and it was going to get harder. Finding the work
It hasn't got any better. It hasn't. It still hasn't. Not at the moment, anyway.
No, because I mean, there are bands working, and I've done some depths for an old friend of mine, who I used to do some function gigs with, and he found himself bereft of a drummer. And after something like 25 years, he called me out of the blue. I said, "Do you want a gig?" And I said, "Okay." And he paid me I think it was £200, I think.
Yeah.
But the shit that hadn't changed was to get there at 4, set the stuff up, hang around for an eternity.
Yeah.
And the biggest lie you're told is, "Oh, you guys will be on at 10:30 after the speeches."
No, never.
No, you might. You just feel like saying you're lying, aren't you? Just don't tell me when we're going. Just tell me when the speeches are finished, the comedian's finished, the raffle's finished.
It's always the raffle that goes on.
How many times have you heard someone come into the band room and say, "Oh, they're still eating"? It's 11:15, you know. And that I hate. I just so hate all that.
Yeah.
So I was very happy to help my friend out, and it was a good band, actually, bloody good band. Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story about that gig. The bass player didn't turn up, and I thought, well, he let them down.
Yeah.
And I was hideously surprised. And this is not like the situation I'm in now with these guys. You just don't let someone down. That's just unheard of. Yeah. And the keyboard player said, well, I was kind of expecting this to happen. I'll play bass with the bass pedals." And I thought, "Oh, here we go." But you know what? He was bloody good. He was really good. And halfway through the first set, I remember thinking, "Wait a minute, there is no bass player here."
No. You didn't
Oh
really.
My God, I didn't even notice.
It's a Steve Winwood thing, isn't it? He doesn't have a bass player in his band.
Anyway, yeah. So I've now got to a situation where I don't think I did any. I think I might have done 2 gigs last year.
Yeah. Do you not enjoy them, even that few a gig? Do you not think, well, I look forward to that, getting out and doing what I've worked at?
Well, I mean, for example, that function gig I just mentioned, I wasn't really looking forward to it, no, because I knew what it was going to be like.
Yeah, and it was.
It's so dispiriting getting somewhere to play and there's nowhere to park.
Yeah.
Before you've even started, you're on a downer.
Of course, you're down in London, up here. There's quite a lot of places to park for most of them. You park anywhere, that's fine. But you're going to have to find somewhere, drop the gear off, find somewhere else to park the car, walk back to the venue. Oh, no.
By which time you've got some doorman saying, "You can't leave this stuff here." So I know I can't leave this stuff here. Yeah.
No, that's not
and that's what I mean when I'm saying these things are personal, because that started to bother me personally.
Yeah, I told
Whereas other guys in the band are just saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. This happens all the time." And I'm thinking, I know this happens all the time, and it bothers me all the time. Yeah. So I'd be best if I remove myself in this situation.
Absolutely. No, I understand that. And
I enjoy teaching, and I really look forward to clinics.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy doing that.
There doesn't seem as many of them these days.
No. Well, you probably had this discussion many times. YouTube's kind of killed that off. Yeah. To a large extent. I mean, the classic one was somebody went to a lot of trouble to put a clinic on in somewhere in Somerset. I can't remember the exact name of the place, and not many people turned up. And somebody on Facebook said, "Oh, next time come to Bath." And I looked at the map, and Bath was half an hour's drive away. Oh,
yeah.
We could, that summed it up for me.
Yeah.
Couldn't be asked.
Yeah.
Half an hour, and it's hard to get people through the door. It really is. I've been putting clinics on. We tried to get a drummer friend of mine called Vince Dunn, and I tried to get this drummers club vibe going.
Yeah.
Once a month at a venue that let us have the venue for free, which is fantastic.
That's the winner then, yes.
and we're charging 10 quid to get in, and we got some of the biggest names in the business. So hard to get people through the door.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so
I'm lucky where we are. There's nothing else going on. If in North Wales somebody wants to go to a clinic, they've got to go to Manchester, London, Birmingham. So that's why I started this.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And all of a sudden, it's a novelty. Wow, this such and such is playing in our local hotel, and
Yeah.
the least we've had is 60, I think. So, and that was for a gentleman, an amazing drummer from America, but not known over here. But he did a masterclass, and it was great. You know, it was.
Who was that?
A chap called Steve Lyman.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I don't know. I saw your advert.
Incredible drummer, but just not known. And since he's been over here, he's been on Drumeo. He's done all sorts. He's had modern drummer awards. So you know, it's.
I really dig doing that. I really love doing that. You know, I've always been like, who are the people that need the help? You know, it's like when you get star pupils who are fast graded.
Yeah.
Why? Because they are bound to do well. And I'm saying, well, that's all very well, but what about the people who need the help the most? Shouldn't we, if they're that good, let's not give them such attention. Let's turn our attention to the people who really need it.
Yeah.
So, you know, like the argument I used to have back in the 90s with the industries, saying, let's go to this venue. And I'm saying, no, let's find the people who don't have this stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to rudiments before we run out of time.
Sure.
So one of the things that I'm always saying to my academy students, who are the serious drummers, so when I meet them for the first time, I'm saying, look, I'm assuming that you've gone to the time and trouble to sign up to this academy because you're very serious about music. I'm assuming that you've signed up for the drum lessons within the academy because you're very serious about being a professional drummer. So what we're going to be talking about in these lessons is what it is you don't know, obviously. But the one thing that I find all these students have in common is they don't know any rudiments. I don't know why that is, but they don't. So I'm saying to them, I want you to have the knowledge that I had when I was your age. So you're saying to me, you're 16 years old, you don't know what a paradiddle is. Now that might not affect your career, but it affects your status within this academy. So I don't want you to not know what a paradiddle is. When I was your age, I knew what a paradiddle was, even if I didn't know what to do with it. I knew what it was. So I want you to be able to have that conversation with other drummers. You don't really want to be leaving this academy aged 18, nearly 19, going to a bar, talk to a drummer and not know what a ratamacue is. A lot of drummers do know that. And if you do know that and they don't know that, that puts you above them.
Totally.
If you don't have if you're not part of the conversation, then you've wasted your time here. But what's interesting is where we are now, the rudiments aren't rudimentary. So they're a kind of a lie. They're not rudimentary, they're quite difficult. Where if you were learning to play the marching drum in a marching band, you wouldn't get very far without a 5-stroke roll.
No.
So that makes it a rudimentary thing that you need. If you're learning to play the drum set, you could have a 20-year career without knowing what a 5-stroke roll is.
Yes, indeed.
Could do.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to these academy students, but I don't want you to not know what I want you to have a 20-year career and know what a 3-2 mambo and a 2-3 mambo is. So I want you to know these things, even if you never play them. I want you to say, yeah, I know what that is.
Yeah, totally.
The alternative being, I've never heard of it, which is good. But what I'm trying to do, and I'm still pursuing this idea, is put forward a set of drum kit rudiments. So if you play 8 notes on the hi-hat and the bass drum on counts, quarter notes 1 and 3 and the snare drum on quarter notes 2 and 4, and you play, that's a rudiment.
Okay, I like that.
You won't get anywhere on a drum set without knowing that.
No.
So that's a rudiment. If you add a bass drum note, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, that's rudiment number 2. Because you could get somewhere with just those 2 things.
Totally.
So I'm trying to construct this whole new idea of rudiments using the word in its dictionary definition. These things are rudimentary to playing the drum set, whereas a 5-stroke roll isn't rudimentary to playing the drum set. It's an icing on the cake. So when I wrote Drumsense Volume 1 and Drumsense Volume 2, the simple remit of those 2 books was to get someone who'd never been able to play the drums before to make recognizable grooves and fills and a bit of swing and a bit of hi-hat control. At the end of Volume 2, you've got someone who can play the drums and understand some very, very basic sticking techniques, accent, not accent.
Yes, totally.
And that's it. Now, if they get that far, then I'm saying to them, right, now let's look a bit harder at your hands. Now let's learn a double stroke roll. And let's apply these new techniques to the things you already know how to do. So you can play the drums, but by adding this extra knowledge, technique, rudiments, and application, you will play the drums twice as well.
Yeah.
But if you start with technique and rudiments, you're not playing the drums yet. You know?
No, you won't have the inclination to go further.
Let's get a groove and a fill together, and then you might be able to play a song, you know.
Well, you probably won't remember, but I actually came down to Croydon, oh gosh, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago to be a Drumsense tutor. I remember, was it Rock Bottom you used to be based at?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember getting the train down, and that's where I first met you, and I picked up...
Was it one of those seminars?
Yes, it was, yeah. It was a weekday.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
And I remember being impressed. I remember reading through Drumsense 1, and I like the way it's not 1 and 2 and. You literally, you count the quavers as 1 to 8.
Yes.
And that makes a lot of sense, especially for a beginner. I know some people frown upon, oh, that's not, but it makes sense. It makes sense. And I teach a lot of youngsters that way.
Yeah, it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
And teachers who have criticized it, I've always said to them, look, I'm not trying to preach. You know, if you have been teaching 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and a 3E and 4, if you can teach that effectively, absolutely go right ahead. You know, you won't get any arguments from me. I've just lowered it I've just made it to the lowest common denominator. Anyone can go 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
And anyone can go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
It's similar to how dance teachers teach. It's 5, 6, 7, 8. They always count the quavers or the eighth notes, literally 1 to 8. And I find it works, especially for absolute beginners to quote a song. It works well. I like it.
Yeah.
So yes, well, look, Colin, we're nearly at the end, and I just want to talk about your fabulous drum choices. You were a sonar artist for a long time. Great drums. Yes. And more recently, a British drum company.
Yes.
What made you change? I have to ask, because I love that company. I really do. I've got a lot of time for Keith and Ian and Al, everybody. So
it was not a simple decision. It just sort of gestated over a period of about 2 years. And one of the reasons, on the one hand, I've been very loyal to Sonor because I absolutely love them. I'd still in the queue say that amongst the best drums in the world.
Agreed.
But the distribution in the UK had just declined to the point of absurdity. Yeah. So I was finding myself doing clinics on equipment that nobody could buy. Yeah. That was one situation. On the other hand, I had met Keith Davidson Keough. And he'd always been really nice. And on one occasion, he said, "Cole, if there's anything I can do, let me know." And that sticks in your head, doesn't it? If someone says that, like that says something like that. So every time there was a drum show, I'd always make a beeline for Keith, and he'd always have something new. And when everything new that he had was lovely, you just think that's so much attention to detail has gone into that. Yeah. So you've got that on one hand and that on the other hand, and gradually one is eclipsing the other. Yeah. And there just came a day when I thought, well, why not? You know, let's make a change. I've been with Sonor for 30 years. Oh, that's a long time. Let's have a change. Let's work with an English company, and don't take that the wrong way. No. An English company based in England,
Totally.
who I can phone up and talk to,
Mm.
and whose factory I can go and visit, and whose drums are just making such a mark on the industry.
Incredible.
You think, well, I'd like to be involved in that, you know.
Yeah.
So if I have an idea, I could go and discuss it. And with Sona, that had become impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was pretty much it. You know, I was in a position, a very fortunate position, to be able to call Keith up and Al Murray, and say, let's go for a drink, and let's see what we think.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Amazing drums, and I mean their artist roster is just going from strength to strength, isn't it? You know, it really is.
Well, let's start with Nico, you know, and go down from there. You know?
Yeah. Oh,
It's just unbelievable. Yeah? And that goes back to Keith's Premier days.
Yeah, of course.
So Nico really never took his eye off that particular ball, and I think he always had his eye on that.
Totally.
But yeah, and they deserve everything they get, those guys. You know,
I get on so well with them all. Great bunch.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Anything.
So there we are. I mean, I'm lucky to have hung on to these endorsements, because when I left Suzi's band, I called up all the companies, said, I don't have a gig anymore. So if you want to take me off your list, all I'm asking is, can I keep the gear? But they all said, no, that's fine. You just carry on. In fact, Zildjian said, oh, if you're not working, we'll give you some clinics to do.
Oh, fabulous.
I know.
Than that, does it?
I know. And I'm still with them today, which is lovely. You know, Absolutely. It's great.
Totally. No, it's great stuff. Well, look, Colin, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hopefully get to see you up in North Wales at some point. If that.